I'd kept that red folder in the bottom drawer of my desk for as long as I could remember. The paper was wrinkled and soft at the edges, the ink a little faded now, but still clear. My will, my wishes. Every line of it reviewed and signed with my late husband sitting beside me, both of us sipping ginger tea that night, talking about the garden we never finished. That folder never moved. I never moved it. Until now. It was gone. At first, I thought maybe I'd shifted it accidentally. I checked every drawer twice. I even moved the vase Curtis gave me last Christmas, the one with the chipped handle I pretended not to notice. Nothing. When I told Curtis about it, he chuckled. Light, too light. "Mama," he said, "maybe you just forgot where you put it. You've been kinda all over the place lately." That stung. I laughed it off, but inside I felt something cold slide down my spine. I still remember where I keep the cinnamon. I remember the color of my mother's shoes at her funeral. I do not forget where I put something that important. Later that night, I sat in the kitchen staring at the open drawer. The wind rattled the kitchen window just a little, and the house creaked like it does when it's thinking too hard. There was a faint smell of old paper in the air, but no paper to be seen, just dust and that soft hum from the fridge, like it was hiding a secret. That red folder didn't walk away on its own. I poured myself a cup of tea, the jasmine kind Ruthie brought me from the market, and sat real still at the table. Something had shifted in my house, and maybe in my family. Curtis's words kept replaying in my mind. Maybe you forgot. But what if I didn't? They came back the next afternoon, Curtis and Tamara, like it was some surprise visit. Brought muffins, too. Blueberry, my favorite. Or at least they used to be. "We just thought we'd help you get things sorted," Tamara said, kissing my cheek like I was fragile. "Maybe go through your papers, clean out the old stuff." I smiled and let them in, watched as Curtis headed straight to my study without asking. Tamara hovered in the kitchen, opening cabinets like she was looking for a lost child. "I just think it's good to stay organized," she said gently, pulling out my old scrapbook from the shelf. She ran her hand across the cover like it was a tombstone. "Mama, some of these photos are out of order." I wanted to say, "So what if they are?" But I didn't. I just kept stirring the tea, letting the silence do the heavy lifting. Curtis came back with a stack of manila folders. "We'll label these better, okay?" he said. "Color code them, maybe." I watched him place the red-labeled ones off to the side. Not one was my red folder. "Found anything familiar?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. He didn't answer, just shrugged. Maybe it got thrown out by mistake. Tamara touched my wrist. "You know you've been forgetting things, Mama. It's okay. That's just what happens." It was a whisper, almost kind, but it cut sharper than a slap. The thing is, yes, I've forgotten the occasional birthday, and yes, I lose track of the kettle sometimes. But this was different. That folder was sacred, and I never would have thrown it out. After they left, I walked into the study and stood where Curtis had been. Something in the air still felt unsettled, like dust that hadn't quite landed. Then I saw it, a yellow sticky note, half stuck under the desk lamp. No writing, just blank, as if someone had planned to leave a message, but thought better of it. Or maybe they didn't need words to send a warning. I peeled it off with trembling fingers and held it under the light. Empty. And that's when I knew. Someone wanted me to question more than just the folder. They wanted me to question myself. It started with the prayer circle. At First Grace Baptist, you can tell a lot by where folks sit and how long they hold your hand when they say, "Peace be with you." This past Sunday, I noticed my usual seat on the third pew had a new purse sitting in it, Linda Booker's. She smiled tight when she saw me, like she didn't expect I'd show. During fellowship, nobody said anything outright, but the silence said plenty. Sister Hattie asked if I'd tried ginkgo biloba for mental sharpness, and someone behind me laughed, too quickly, like they weren't supposed to. Even Reverend Charles glanced at me with that soft, pitiful look he usually reserves for widows and war vets. I stood by the punch table, holding a glass of sweet tea I didn't want, while the room buzzed with conversations that dropped to a murmur every time I passed. Nobody mentioned the will, of course, but I could hear it between every "bless your heart" and "you still driving that old Buick?" Someone had been talking, and I knew who. Tamara had always been careful with her words, but she could bend the truth until it bulled like a willow in the storm. Mama's just not herself these days. That's all she had to say to make people fill in the blanks, especially when I wasn't around to correct them. Later, I found a folded bulletin tucked inside my pew Bible. Someone had written on the back in pencil, "We're praying for your clarity." No name, just the message. I ran my thumb over the letters, wondering if it was meant to comfort me or shame me. As I walked back to the car, I felt eyes on my back. I clutched my purse tight, though I wasn't carrying anything worth stealing. But that wasn't the point. It wasn't just about the folder anymore. It was about my name, my mind, my legacy. And if they were willing to steal the first, they'd try to steal the rest. I found it stuck to the side of the sugar tin. A yellow Post-it, same kind as the blank one I saw before. But this time, it had words. 4, written in neat, narrow pen strokes. It's handled. C. I stood there with the cabinet door still open, my hand frozen on the tin, like I'd found a snake curled inside. I hadn't touched that sugar since Friday. I remember because I made cornbread that day, the old way, with buttermilk and just a whisper of nutmeg. That tin lives in the back of the cabinet, behind the ginger snaps Curtis doesn't know I still buy. It's handled. Handled how? By who? And why would Curtis sign it that way? When I called him, he answered on speakerphone, like he wanted Tamara to hear. "What note?" he said. "Mama, I haven't been in your kitchen since Sunday." Tamara chimed in with that syrupy concern. "Are you sure you didn't write it yourself? Maybe it was just a reminder." I didn't argue. There's no use arguing with people who've already decided you're confused. After the call, I sat down at the kitchen table, the Post-it still in my hand. My tea had gone cold. I looked around the room, same pale wallpaper with the tulip pattern, same fridge humming behind me, same cracked ceramic sugar bowl on the windowsill, but nothing felt the same. I'd been living in this house for 42 years, raised 3 children here, buried my husband, buried a dog and 2 cats too, and now it felt like I was being pushed out by shadows that wore familiar faces. That night, I locked every window and door before bed, even the one in the laundry room nobody ever uses. I slid the yellow note into my Bible between Psalms and Proverbs, and sat awake long after the house went still. Someone thought they'd handled something, but they hadn't handled me. They came with pot roast and too many smiles. Curtis walked in first, holding the casserole dish like a trophy. Tamara followed with a tray of green beans and cornbread that looked suspiciously like the frozen kind. "We thought we'd do dinner here for a change," she said, already setting the table. I knew something was off the moment I saw the heirloom gravy boat, the silver one with the little lion heads on each side. My mother-in-law gave it to me on our 10th anniversary. We only ever brought it out on Easter or Thanksgiving, not for casual Sundays. But I didn't say anything. I just lit the candles. We ate quietly at first. Curtis complimented the wallpaper like he hadn't seen it 1,000 times. Tamara kept pouring sweet tea into my glass before I could finish it. Then, just as I reached for a biscuit, Curtis slid a manila envelope across the table. "Just some precautionary paperwork," he said lightly. "Power of attorney stuff. You know, just in case anything ever happened." Tamara reached over and patted my hand. "It's just smart planning, Mama. You always told us to be prepared." I looked down at the envelope. The roast steamed on my plate, untouched. A sliver of carrot rolled to the edge like it wanted to escape too. "I'm still breathing," I said, my voice low. "Of course you are," Curtis replied. "But we'd hate to be caught unprepared. This just gives us the ability to step in if needed, for your sake." They smiled like it was a kindness, but it wasn't. It was a theft, of trust, of control, of dignity. I picked up the envelope and nodded slowly. "Let me sleep on it," I said. Tamara beamed. Of course, take your time. But I wasn't going to sleep. After they left, I cleared the table in silence. I held that old gravy boat in my hands for a moment, traced the lion's head with my thumb. Then I set it back on the shelf, upside down. A new kind of war had started in my house, and they didn't know. I'd just put on my armor. I didn't tell a soul where I was going. I took the back roads, the ones lined with crepe myrtles and houses that hadn't changed since Reagan was in office. My hands gripped the wheel tighter than they needed to. Every bump in the road rattled more than the car. It rattled something in my chest, but I kept driving. Mr. Delaney's office hadn't changed. Same cracked leather chairs, same ticking wall clock that always seemed a few minutes slow. He stood when I walked in, adjusted his glasses, and gave me a look that made me feel human again. "Ms. Eileen," he said, "I was just thinking about you." I didn't cry, but the air in the room thickened behind my eyes. "I need to see the will," I said. "The original." He didn't ask questions, just walked to his filing cabinet, pulled out a yellowed envelope, and placed it on the desk like he was setting down a newborn baby. My name was written in James's handwriting, looped and sure. My breath caught when I saw it. We opened it together. Every page was as I remembered. Curtis and Tamara were listed, but not as beneficiaries, only Marcus and the charities James and I had supported for years. "I want a certified copy," I said. Delaney looked at me, then slowly nodded. "You suspect tampering?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. He slid a notepad toward me. "We can update the will today if you'd like." But I shook my head. Not yet. I needed them to show their cards first. "Just the copy for now." As he printed the documents, I looked around his office, at the dusty plaques, the fading photo of his late wife, the plant that refused to die no matter how dry the room stayed. This was what memory looked like. Honest. Fading at the edges maybe, but still holding on. He handed me the envelope. I slipped it into my purse like a weapon. On the way home, the sky turned the color of old pewter. Rain threatened but didn't fall. Not yet. But the storm was coming. And this time, I'd be ready. Sometimes the best way to find out what someone's hiding is to give them something to steal. I spent the afternoon putting together a decoy. I found an old red folder, close enough in color to the original, and filled it with random paperwork. Tax records from 20 years ago, grocery lists, a church bulletin from the year Curtis got baptized. Then, on top, I placed a mock version of my will, typed up, unnotarized, and vague enough to look convincing but legally worthless. I left it slightly askew on my desk, not hidden, not flaunted, just visible enough to tempt someone looking for confirmation. Then I waited. I acted like nothing had changed. At dinner that night, I let Tamara spoon casserole onto my plate and laughed at Curtis's dry little joke about the neighbor's dog. I played my role, the forgetful mama, the tired old widow who might just need her kids to step in. But inside me, something sharp had returned. Later, I sat at James's old desk and pulled out his magnifying glass, the one he used to read contracts when his eyesight started going. I used it to study every line of the real will, just to remind myself of the truth. His handwriting still lived on those pages, each letter like a whispered vow. I traced the loops of his signature with my finger. "I'm not crazy," I whispered aloud, "and I'm not done." That night, I went to bed early. I didn't lock the study door. By morning, the decoy folder was gone. Not moved, not misplaced, gone. I checked every corner, knowing full well it wouldn't be there. My desk was exactly as I left it, except emptier. And cleaner, too. The kind of tidy only a guilty hand leaves behind. I walked into the kitchen, set the kettle on the stove, and stared out the window as the steam rose. They thought they were ahead of me, but I'd just taken the lead. I left the keys on the table like bait in a mousetrap. They were my house keys. 2 brass, 1 silver, clipped together with the little gold fob James gave me for our 30th anniversary. Worn smooth from years of turning locks, from nights when we'd come home late and fumble with groceries in one hand, laughter in the other. Curtis came over, just to check in. No dinner this time, no Tamara either. Just him and that fake warmth he wears like cologne. He kissed my cheek, asked how I was feeling, and offered to tighten the back door hinge like he always used to. I said nothing about the keys. Just left them there, right next to the newspaper and a lukewarm cup of tea. Then I walked into the hallway and watched through the mirror. Curtis saw them immediately. I saw the hesitation in his eyes, a flicker, like he was debating whether to wait until I left the room. Then he slid them into his pocket. Quiet, like a thief. He moved toward the study. I couldn't hear much, just the faint groan of the floorboards, the click of the doorknob, the sigh of a door easing open. I stayed where I was. No sudden movements, no confrontations, just listening. He was inside for maybe 12 minutes. When he returned, he didn't say a word. Just dropped the keys back on the table like they hadn't moved, but they were warmer now. I touched them after he left. They held the heat of his fingers. That told me everything. I sat down in James's old chair by the bookshelf and ran my thumb across the gold key fob. A little dent on the edge from when Marcus dropped them as a boy. That dent had a story. My children had stories once, but Curtis had stopped asking about mine. Later that night, I watched the sun fall over the front yard, staining everything orange like a slow burn. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. He didn't even knock. That's what stayed with me. He didn't even knock. Ruthie always made lemon balm tea when something was wrong. She didn't say that out loud, but I could tell. The smell hit me before I even sat down, herbal and sweet, with a faint bite underneath. That's how Ruthie operates, gentle on the outside, sharp where it counts. I'd lived next door to her for almost 30 years. Our husbands built the fence between our yards together. We'd shared casseroles, grief, prayer circles, and secrets. She didn't knock when she came over. I didn't either. "You okay?" she asked, sliding a chipped porcelain cup across the table. "Peachy," I said, lifting the cup to my lips. The chip pressed right against my bottom lip, same one that had been there since the summer her grandson knocked it off the porch railing. She didn't believe me. I could tell. Ruthie had a way of seeing through things, like she had X-ray vision for women's hearts. "I saw Tamara leaving your house earlier this week," she said, after a long sip. "Middle of the day. She had a big envelope in her hands. Looked like it mattered." My fingers tightened around the cup. "Could have been nothing," she added quickly. But she was smiling, not the good kind. I didn't answer right away, just watched the steam rise between us. "She have a key to your house?" I nodded slowly. Ruthie leaned back in her chair, creaking wood filling the space between our thoughts. "You always were more generous than me." I wanted to defend Tamara. I wanted to believe she came by for recipes or old photos or something harmless. But Ruthie's face told me the truth I hadn't wanted to admit. "She didn't see me watching," Ruthie said. "Didn't think anyone was home next door." We sat in silence for a while, sipping, listening to the cicadas screaming, like they had something to confess. When I got up to leave, Ruthie touched my arm. "Not all family deserves your trust," she said quietly. "Blood's thick, sure, but lies can drown you faster." I walked home with that chipped cup still warm in my chest, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel crazy, just betrayed. The phone rang just after 9. The landline, the one in the hallway with the coiled cord and a little chip on the receiver from when Marcus dropped it, trying to call into a radio contest. I was still in my robe. The morning light spilled across the kitchen tiles, and the coffee hadn't even finished brewing. I picked up, expecting a telemarketer. "Mrs. Eileen Thomas?" the voice asked, polite. Crisp. "Yes?" "This is Andrea with Blue Ridge Realty. Just wanted to confirm we're still on track to finalize the paperwork by Friday. Closing should be smooth. We already have the buyers lined up, and your son said—" I stopped breathing. "I'm sorry," I said slowly. "My what?" said. There was a pause, just a flicker, but it was enough. "Your son, Curtis Thomas. He's listed as point of contact. We've been working through his attorney for the past few weeks. I assumed—" "You assumed wrong," I said, my voice sharp like winter. "Oh, I apologize, ma'am. Would you like me to—" I didn't let her finish. I hung up and just stood there. The phone still in my hand, the dial tone buzzing in my ear like a swarm of hornets. My house, the porch James built with his own hands, the oak tree we planted the year after Tamara was born, the kitchen I repainted twice, once in yellow, then soft blue, because I couldn't decide which felt more like home. They were selling it, behind my back, like I was already dead. I walked into the kitchen, slow, deliberate, my feet steady on the cold tile. I opened the junk drawer, not so junky now, and pulled out my old checkbook, tucked inside a sleeve of old utility receipts. On the front page, in fading red ink, was Mr. Delaney's number. I circled it again, fresh. This house held everything I'd built, and if Curtis thought he could erase that with a signature, he hadn't learned a damn thing from me. Not yet. James used to say, if somebody tries to bury the truth, don't whisper. Rent a microphone. I figured a billboard was close enough. I drove myself across town, windows down, purse on the passenger seat like a co-pilot. I wore my big sunglasses, not because I was hiding, but because I wanted to see everything without anyone seeing me blink. The young man at the front desk looked up from behind his monitor, chewing something with too much sugar. "You hear about ad space?" "I'm here about something that needs to be seen," I said. He blinked. "Okay. What kind of product?" "Not a product," I said, pulling the certified will out of my bag. "A name, or the absence of one." He took the paper like it might burn him. "I need this blown up to readable size, black and white, just like the truth." He read the first few lines, then looked up at me, cautious. "This a legal thing?" I smiled. "This is a family thing." He didn't ask any more questions, just walked me through the specs. Height, width, font size. I chose the biggest billboard on Maple Avenue, right at the bend in the road where you can't help but look up. It's across from the post office, where everybody goes, even if they pretend they don't. "Most folks use it for roofing companies or lost pets," he said. "Good," I replied. "This is about something lost, too." He asked if I wanted names bolded. I said no. Let the absence speak louder than presence. As I signed the invoice, he tilted his head. "Ma'am, you sure you want to go through with this?" I looked him dead in the eye. When people lie loud, the truth has to shout louder. The deposit came out of my savings jar. The ceramic one shaped like a sunflower, with a crack down the side. I'd been putting away money for a trip to Savannah. Looks like I was taking a different kind of journey. As I walked back to my car, the wind picked up. I swear I could feel James walking beside me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt taller. I went back the next morning, dressed sharper than usual, pressed slacks, a navy cardigan, and James's fountain pen in my purse like a weapon. The girl at the front desk introduced herself as Shayla, mid-20s, box braids, sharp nails, sharper eyes. She led me into a little office with a dusty monitor and too many energy drink cans. "So," she said, typing as she talked, "we're blowing up a legal document, just making sure I got that right?" "You got it right," I said, handing her the certified copy. "And I need every word to be clear, legible, no fancy fonts, no borders, no distractions." She raised an eyebrow, but nodded. As she scanned the pages, she paused. "You want me to remove anything? Or highlight any names?" "Don't change a thing," I said, "but leave the missing ones just as they are." She looked up. "That's kind of the point, huh?" I smiled. "Exactly." We spent the next 40 minutes adjusting line breaks, sizing margins, and making sure nothing bled off the edges. I sat beside her, watching each section appear on the screen, paragraph by paragraph, word by word. There was a strange kind of power in seeing it like that. Marcus's name bolded under sole beneficiary, charitable trusts listed, no mention of Curtis, no Tamara. Their absence sat on that page like thunder behind glass. Shayla leaned back, stretched her arms. "You want a signature line at the bottom?" I pulled James's old pen from my bag, black lacquer, gold tip, still heavy with memory. He used it to sign our first mortgage. I used it now to sign off on the truth. I wrote my name clean across the bottom of the mock-up. "Looks like a revolution," Shayla said, quietly impressed. "No," I said. "Looks like a reckoning." She hit save, then printed a small proof for me to take home. I folded it carefully and tucked it into the sunflower savings jar, right behind the last $20 bill. Sunday, the billboard goes up. Let them drive past it on their way to brunch. Let them squint. Let them read. They showed up just after lunch, both of them red-faced and storming like weather. Curtis banged on the door hard enough to shake the glass. I didn't flinch. I was already seated in the living room, cup of tea in hand, the Sunday paper unopened beside me, waiting. I opened the door slow. Let the silence do the heavy lifting. "We need to talk, Mama," Curtis said through clenched teeth. Tamara was behind him, sunglasses on, even though the clouds were thick. "Then talk," I said, stepping aside. They came in like a windstorm, not even taking off their shoes. Tamara sat. Curtis paced. "You put our family business on a billboard," he spat. "In public." "It wasn't family business," I said. "It was my business." Tamara's hands shook in her lap. "Everyone's calling us. The church, Marcus, even Reverend Charles." She took off her glasses. Her eyes were rimmed in red. I didn't think you'd go this far." The living room clock ticked behind us, loud as a metronome counting down a long overdue confrontation. Each tick felt like a shovel of dirt being thrown on the version of me they wanted to bury. Curtis leaned over the coffee table. "You've humiliated us. You made us look like criminals." I met his eyes. "Then why do you feel like one?" He looked away first. Tamara's voice cracked. "It was supposed to be temporary. We didn't know what to do. You were shutting us out." "I was protecting what your father and I built," I said. "Because I saw what you were doing when you thought I wasn't looking." Curtis scoffed. "You don't get to—" "I do," I interrupted, my voice sharp now. "Because you tried to erase me quietly. So I answered loudly." The clock kept ticking. Nobody spoke. I sipped my tea, still warm, still steady. They had nothing left to say. As they stood to leave, Tamara whispered, "People are never going to forget this." I nodded once. "Good." She knocked this time, soft, like she didn't want the house to hear. I opened the door, and there she stood. No makeup, no earrings. Hair pulled back in a loose braid that made her look like a version of herself from long ago. The girl I once called my daughter-in-law. The girl I once thought of as my own. "I just want to talk," she said, eyes down. I stepped aside, let her in. We didn't sit in the living room. She wandered to the fireplace and stared at the old wedding photo I keep on the mantel, me and James standing under the oak tree in the backyard, his hand on my waist, my eyes sharp as a blade. She picked it up and ran her thumb along the glass. "I used to think you looked scary in this picture," she said with a sad smile. "But now I think you just looked sure." I stayed quiet. She placed the frame back down, crooked, then sat on the arm of the couch. "I know I messed up," she said. "I know." The clock ticked, but I didn't move to straighten the photo. I wanted her to see it off-kilter, to feel it. "I was scared," she said. "You always seemed like you had everything figured out. And when James died, and then your health started to shift, I thought maybe it was all falling apart, and I didn't want to be left with nothing." There it was. The truth. Not shouted, just laid bare like laundry in the rain. "I gave you nothing to fear," I said softly. "Until you gave me reason to." Her eyes welled up. "I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted to matter." "You mattered," I said, "until the lies started mattering more." She nodded, biting her lip. "Curtis says we should lawyer up. He thinks you're going to change the will." "I already did," I said. Her face crumpled, not just at the words, but at the finality in them. We sat in silence for a while. She didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't offer it. Some truths are too quiet for apologies, and some silences speak louder than screams. Curtis didn't knock. He rang the bell once and waited like he was making a delivery. I opened the door, and there he stood, buttoned up, pressed slacks, phone in one hand, unreadable face in the other. "Got a minute?" he asked. I nodded, stepped aside. He walked in like it was a business call. Didn't sit, didn't take the coffee I offered, just stood near the doorway, as if refusing to get too comfortable in his own mother's home. "I wanted to clear the air," he said. "This billboard situation, it's damaging, to all of us." "Is that so?" I said. He paced slowly, like he was rehearsing a courtroom statement. "People are talking. Church folks, old clients, Marcus's friends. Everyone thinks we tried to scam you." "Did you?" I asked, calm. He looked at me like I'd said something childish. "That's not the point." I noticed the way his hand kept tapping the phone, rhythmically, like he wanted to record the conversation, or maybe just wanted to be somewhere else. "This wasn't supposed to go public," he said tightly. I leaned back in my chair. "It wasn't supposed to happen." He sighed through his nose, tired of the semantics. "Look, you've made your point. You embarrassed us. You won. So now what? You just let us look like villains forever?" I looked down at the mug I'd set out for him. Clean, still steaming, untouched. The guest mug. The one with the blue rim he used to pick when he was a boy. I quietly slid it off the table and took it back to the kitchen. When I returned, he was staring at the bookshelf. "You know," he said, "this could have been handled differently." I nodded. It could have. He finally turned to face me. "What happens next?" I smiled, small and certain. "That depends on what you do next." Curtis didn't flinch, didn't apologize. He adjusted his collar and walked out the door without saying goodbye. And as I watched him leave, I realized something. He was never ashamed of what he did. Just ashamed that everyone finally saw it. I started writing things down, not feelings, facts, what time Curtis called, what Tamara wore when she visited, where the mail landed on the porch, which lights were on when I came home from church. They said I was slipping, so I started keeping track. I found the journal in James's old footlocker, bottom drawer, under his fishing vest, and the scarf he never let me throw out. It was leather-bound, stiff from years untouched, still smelled like cedar and dust and something else, maybe patience. The pages were blank, waiting. I dated the first entry, wrote in blue ink, pressed hard, like carving a line in the sand. Tuesday, 7:42 a.m. Phone rang. I answered on the third ring. Andrea from Blue Ridge Realty confirmed Curtis had initiated paperwork. Caller ID verified. Next line. Coffee grounds were wet when I hadn't made coffee yet. Filter left in sink. Tamara came by yesterday to drop off soup. I didn't drink it. Little things. Stacked like bricks. A fortress around the truth. I didn't show it to anyone. Not yet. But I kept it near me like a second spine. One afternoon, while flipping through James's old tapes, yes, tapes, I found one labeled Voicemail Backup 7. I almost tossed it. But something told me not to. I played it on my old cassette deck. His voice came through, warm and low. "Hey, sweetheart, don't forget, you're the one with the memory, the one who keeps the house running. Don't let anybody make you think otherwise." I sat there for a long while after that, tapes still spinning even after his voice ran out. In the next entry, I wrote his words down. Then I underlined them. Twice. My memory is not broken. It's been bruised by liars. But now it's documented. And if they want to test me again, they'll have to go through every line. Ruthie knocked like she always did. Twice. Then pause. Then one more. I opened the door and saw it in her face. She had something to say that wasn't going to sit easy. "I found something," she said, holding up a little portable DVD player like it was a ticking clock. "It's from my security camera. You want to see?" I didn't ask what it was, just nodded and stepped aside. We sat at the kitchen table, the one with the faint tea ring from Tamara's last visit. Ruthie plugged the thing in, popped in a scratch disc, and hit play. Grainy footage. My front walkway, The timestamp in the corner said, Monday, 2:13 p.m. There he was, Curtis, walking up my steps, glancing behind him, pulling out the spare key from the hollow rock I used to hide near the hydrangeas. I hadn't told anyone I still kept it there, not even Ruthie. The footage continued. He let himself in, disappeared from the frame for 7 minutes, then re-emerged with something tucked under his arm. A red folder. My folder. Ruthie didn't say a word. She didn't have to. She just sat there, letting me absorb it. When the video ended, she pressed stop and looked at me. You want a copy? I nodded. Yes. I didn't shake. I didn't cry. But inside, something settled. Like a bruise finally blooming to its final color, I thought I'd feel rage or heartbreak. But what I felt was clarity. It was one thing to suspect, another thing entirely to see. We burned a copy of the footage. I placed it in an envelope and slid it under the lining of my memory journal. Between the pages of facts and fragments, I added one more line. Curtis, Monday, 2:13 p.m., entered with stolen key, exited with stolen truth. The pen didn't tremble when I wrote it. Today, the truth had a timestamp, and from now on, it had a witness too. I wrote the letter at my kitchen table, late at night, while the house was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator breathing. No anger, no drama, just the truth. 3 paragraphs, signed at the bottom with my full name, middle name included, because I wanted them to know it was mine, every word. I dropped it off at the church office the next morning, folded neatly inside an envelope with, "To be read aloud," or printed, "Your call," written on the front. I didn't wait for a reply. That Sunday, it was printed in the back of the bulletin. Last page, no fanfare, no title, but everyone read it. I watched from my usual spot in the 3rd pew. Linda Booker glanced at me 3 times before she even got to the announcements. Reverend Charles paused when he saw it, then folded his copy in half and tucked it into his Bible like a bookmark he wasn't sure he wanted to use. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't a plea. It was a reckoning. To the members of First Grace, you've known me for over 40 years. You've watched me raise my children, bury my husband, and serve this community. So when whispers began that I was no longer myself, that I was slipping, you nodded, some in concern, some in judgment. Let me assure you, I am still here. My memory is intact. My decisions are deliberate. And my silence was never confusion. It was grief giving you the benefit of the doubt. No more of that. I wish peace for all of you, even those who looked the other way. Sincerely, Eileen May Thomas. After the benediction, some folks avoided my gaze. Others squeezed my hand too long, like they were apologizing without words. Ruthie gave me a knowing nod. That was enough. I stayed in the sanctuary after most had gone, listening to the creak of the wooden pews settle back into stillness. The truth didn't need to shout anymore. It had a bulletin and a signature in ink. There was a sheet cake on the table. White frosting, blue trim, piped roses in the corners. Happy 65th, Mama. Written in shaky pink letters like it was trying too hard to be cheerful. No one touched it. I stood at the head of the living room, will in hand, glasses low on my nose. The couch was full. Curtis stiff in a polo shirt, Tamara twisting a napkin in her lap, Marcus leaning forward, elbows on his knees, eyes steady on mine. I won't keep y'all long, I said, but there's something I need to read, out loud, so there's no more confusion, no more whispers. I opened the envelope. My fingers didn't shake. I, Eileen May Thomas, being of sound mind and full memory, do declare this to be my last will and testament. The words filled the room like incense, slow, thick, undeniable. I read every clause, every name, Marcus's name, the charities James and I chose together, the scholarship fund in his memory. No mention of Curtis, no mention of Tamara. Tamara's throat clicked. Curtis stared at a spot on the wall like he could disappear into it. I didn't raise my voice, didn't waver. All possessions, properties, and decisions related to my estate are to be executed as stated herein. This document is notarized, witnessed, and valid. I folded the will. Silence. The air in the room changed. Like pressure dropped, like truth pulled the rug out from under every lie they'd built. Curtis stood first, didn't say a word, just walked to the front door, his jaw set like concrete. Tamara followed, eyes glassy, makeup smudged. Marcus stayed. "You didn't have to do that, Mama," he said gently. "Yes," I said. "I did." He nodded, then walked to the kitchen and cut me a slice of the cake. Vanilla with strawberry filling. He placed it in front of me with a fork and a single lit candle. "You gonna make a wish?" he asked. I looked at the flame, then I blew it out, slow. "No," I said. I already got what I needed. And it wasn't the cake. It was gone. I stood over the jewelry box, lid open, the afternoon light slanting through the blinds and casting long bars across my bedroom floor. The ring wasn't there. Not the simple gold band I wear now, the one I still twist when I'm thinking, but the original. The proposal ring. The one with the diamond James saved 3 years to buy. The one he gave me under that oak tree, with his hands shaking and a string quartet playing off someone's old radio in the next yard. I hadn't worn it in years. Too delicate, too precious. I kept it wrapped in the corner of a silk handkerchief, nestled in the top left corner of my jewelry box. Always. And now? Nothing. The velvet indentation was still there, like a ghost of something valuable. But the ring? Gone. I didn't cry. Not this time. I closed the lid slowly, gently, like saying goodbye to something I hadn't meant to lose. Maybe it had been taken weeks ago. Maybe it was recent. But the message was clear. This wasn't about inheritance anymore. It was about erasure. About taking what couldn't be listed in a document or printed on a billboard, a symbol, a memory, a vow. I sat on the edge of my bed, running my thumb across the edge of the box, and tried to imagine Tamara's hands lifting the silk. Or Curtis, quick and clinical, just grabbing whatever looked valuable. Neither version hurt less. I didn't call anyone, didn't accuse. Instead, I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and opened my journal to a clean page. I wrote 2 words. They're still coming. Because even after truth has been spoken out loud, after lies have been dragged into the daylight, some people just can't stand not getting the last word. But I still had a few left of my own, and I was saving them. The shop was smaller than I remembered. I hadn't been inside Grady's Pond since Marcus was in high school, and bought a trumpet he never learned to play, 2 towns over, a place where secrets go to change hands. I wouldn't have gone at all if not for Sister Clarice from church, who mentioned, in passing, that she'd seen a piece just like yours on display while buying a fishing rod for her nephew. She didn't mean anything by it, but my chest tightened like a fist. The bell jingled when I walked in. The air smelled like old pennies and cigarette ghosts. Behind the glass, lined up like orphans, were rings and watches and brooches, some fake, some trying not to be. And there it was, third from the left, my ring, oval-cut diamond, flanked by 2 tiny sapphires, set in platinum, a bit dulled, but unmistakable. I leaned in closer. The handkerchief was gone, of course, but the inscription? Still there, etched inside the band. To EMT, a forever thing. My throat didn't close. My hands didn't shake. I simply pointed. "That one," I said. The man behind the counter, gray beard, coffee-stained fingers, looked from the ring to me. "Beautiful piece," he said. "Came in about 2 weeks ago." "Do you keep intake names?" He scratched his chin. "Only with ID, yeah." I held his gaze. He hesitated, then pulled out a clipboard from under the register, flipped a few pages. "Tamara Thomas," he read. "Showed ID, said it was her mother's." I nodded once. "How much?" He named a number. More than it was worth. I didn't blink. I paid in cash. He handed it over in a tiny white box like it was a gift. I didn't thank him. I drove home with the radio off, the box resting in the passenger seat like it might try to escape. Back in my kitchen, I opened the sugar tin, same one they'd left a post-it on weeks ago. I dropped the ring inside, let it land with a sound like the end of something, sweet on the outside, hollow in the middle. Mr. Delaney didn't ask why I was there. He just stood, offered me the chair near the window, and pulled the blinds halfway so the afternoon glare wouldn't catch my eyes. He always remembered that about me, how too much sunlight made me squint and tear up, even when I wasn't crying. "I'm ready," I said. He gave a small nod, like he'd been waiting to hear those 2 words since the first time I walked through his door. We got to work. No Curtis, no Tamara, not even as backups. No language about should circumstances change. No soft exits. Just clean lines and final decisions. I named Marcus as sole beneficiary. And then we added the scholarships, one for caregivers, one for music students at the high school where James used to volunteer, legacy not in name, but in kindness. Mr. Delaney adjusted his glasses. "You sure?" he asked softly, as a matter of duty. "I'm past sure," I said. He slid the papers toward me. I pulled James's fountain pen from my bag, the same one I'd used on the billboard design. The lacquer had started to fade a little now, but it still wrote smooth. I signed my name without pause, Eileen May Thomas, firm, decided, unmistakable. Mr. Delaney took the document, flipped through it, then placed it in a manila envelope. "This version makes it unchallenged," he said. "It's legally sealed, witnessed, and dated. Anyone tries to go around it, won't stand a chance." "Good," I said. "I'm done leaving doors unlocked." He didn't smile, but he didn't have to. He just handed me a copy, nodded, and stood as I gathered my things. I left his office feeling lighter than I had in months, like I'd finally exhaled after holding my breath for too long. Back home, I slipped the new will into the sunflower jar. The same one that once held billboard money. Now it held something stronger. Proof. And peace. They tried to erase me. But now I had the ink. I hadn't been back since Easter. Too much had happened. Too much silence between visits. But this morning I packed up the thermos. Tomato soup, the way James liked it. Extra thick, with a pinch of ground clove. I wrapped it in a towel and placed it in the passenger seat like company. The drive was quiet. No music. Just the hum of the tires and the sound of my own breath. The cemetery sat at the edge of town, shaded by a grove of sugar maples that always turned too early in the season. The air smelled like warm leaves and memory. I parked under the same crooked tree we always joked about trimming, but never did. His headstone was just as I left it, clean, simple, etched deep. James R. Thomas, beloved husband, builder of all things, steady. I sat cross-legged on the grass beside him, opened the thermos, poured a little into the cup and set it near the stone. Then I talked. I told him about the folder, about the lies, the post-it, the keys, the billboard. I told him about Tamara's silence and Curtis's cold anger and how Marcus never once asked for anything, but stayed anyway. I told him about the ring, the pawn shop, the letter in the church bulletin, how Ruthie never flinched, and finally, I told him I changed the will, fully. No more in-betweens, no more hoping people might choose right if given the chance. Then I cried, not loud, not wild, just steady, like the drip of the thermos cup against the grass. When I was done, I took the folded will from my coat pocket and laid it gently on the headstone. Not to leave it, just to let him feel it for a moment. His name wasn't on the page, but his spirit was in every line. I sat there until the soup went cold, then I packed it up, folded the will, pressed it back into my coat. He didn't answer, but he didn't need to. He always trusted me to finish the things we started. It was stuck to the fridge. Same yellow square, same size, same corner. But this time, the handwriting was different, rounder, cleaner, like someone who still cared how their words looked when read. I stared at it before touching it, held my breath, expecting another wave of control dressed up as concern. But it wasn't that. It was this. You're stronger than you think. I see you. M. I didn't need to wonder who M was. Marcus never said much, never took sides, but he'd stayed. Through the dinners, the fallout, the funeral, the tears. He'd shown up when it counted, and more importantly, hadn't asked for anything in return. I peeled the note off slowly, careful not to tear it. The paper was still warm from the hum of the fridge. My thumb hovered over his signature, tracing the curve of the M like a small grace note. I didn't call him, didn't write him back. Just took the note and walked to the living room. I opened my journal, flipping past the bullet points and the time-stamped betrayals, and pressed the sticky note onto the blank middle page. Dead center, not an ending, not a beginning, just something true. Then I stood on my tiptoes and placed the sunflower jar back on the highest shelf in the kitchen. The one where I keep birthday candles and old cookie cutters shaped like hearts. Not because I was hiding anything anymore, but because for the first time in months, I wasn't bracing for another crack in the floorboards. I was just standing still, and that felt like power. The house feels different now. Not quieter, just honest. The kind of quiet that doesn't hide things behind it. I brewed my tea slow this morning. Let the kettle sing. No rush, no watching the front door, no folded papers shoved under cushions just in case someone came by. Just me and the day. The living room clock still ticks like it always has. The hum of the fridge still fills the silence. The light through the window lands on the bookshelf in a way that makes the dust look like glitter. I used to see that dust and think I was falling behind. Now I just see it as proof I've lived here. I walked past the sunflower jar and didn't touch it. Past the journal, closed on the counter. Past the little white box that once held my ring, now empty and tucked away in a drawer with no label. The billboard still stands. They haven't taken it down. Maybe they don't know how. Maybe they're hoping I'll get tired of paying for it. But I'm not tired. For once, I'm not tired. Ruthie dropped off fresh lemons this morning. Marcus texted me a picture of a new plant he bought, called it low maintenance but thriving. I laughed harder than I expected to. I know people are still talking. At the post office, in pew whispers, on porches. Let them. Because now, when I hear my name, I don't flinch. I sit taller. I breathe easier. I live in a house that was almost taken, but wasn't. I sleep under a roof that tried to hold a lie but couldn't. I carry a name that was almost erased but endured. They said I forgot the will, but I never did. I remembered everything.